Ladies and gentlemen, Ibra Logan Rosenberg, excited to have a friend of mine, someone I admire on the show. Pablo Torre Finds Out. Pablo Torre's new venture with Meadowlark Media. You've probably seen Pablo on your TV over the years talking about a variety of things. Sometimes you can hear him. Sometimes you're just like at a bar and his face is just on your screen at like 3 o'clock talking about God knows what. But he's done a lot of amazing things at ESPN over the years, and now is with Dan Le Batard and the good folks at Meadowlark. Congrats, Pablo.
Thank you, dude. That is my prime demo. People who have seen me sort of like above a sports bar around 5 p.m. and assume I'm smart just based on like, I guess the whole, like I'm an Asian American Filipino thing. And I project that way, but really nobody knows if I know anything. So thank you for indulging the idea that I might know something.
Listen, it totally works on me every time I see. I'm like Pablo. For me, I'm on the air at the time, so I actually would like to think there are a lot of people who consume us silently the same way. They have me blabbing in silence on one TV, you blabbing in silence on the next TV. But when we're doing the K show, I often see you, and it's been cool to watch your story. Now, before we get into the details of Pablo Torre Finds Out. Yes. You are still with ESPN. You stayed with ESPN in some capacity as well, correct?
Yeah, I'm still haunting sports bars, still doing Around the Horn, still doing PTIs, still wandering eyes over to your screen where you and Don and Kay are just infuriating each other, it sounds like, or looks like, I should say.
Looks like, certainly. Yeah.
But the gas bagging hasn't gone away. But this platform, what the new show is sort of this idea of, what happens if I get to follow my own curiosities? Like, I think you know this from doing all of the jobs that you do. So much of my job at ESPN has been be the smartest, funniest, most interesting version of yourself within the mandate of what the news cycle is that day, which is a challenge that I love. This feels like, what if I let you figure out what starting a magazine in 2023 might be like? And that is terrifying and exciting and something that my mom still has questions about.
So I looked at, by the way, you should go subscribe right now for free, www.pablo.show, and you could subscribe for free to Pablo Torre Finds Out. And for example, the first thing I saw was a day or two ago, the video go up of you, episode 1, confronting Dan Le Batard with these Donald Trump tapes. And that sounds really wild, but what we mean is
well, it is wild, Peter. Let's admit it. It's wild that the first episode that I did at Meadowlark Media, co-founded by Dan Le Batard, was confront my new boss with tapes that he had erased from the internet of his interviews with Donald Trump.
He'd erased them fully.
Dude, they got memory hold. Like Dan, for people who don't understand his legend, his reputation, his myth is that Dan is one of the good guys, right? He's the good guy in the documentary. He left ESPN to criticize Donald Trump. That was one of his last acts. And so what I did was realize that he had interviewed Trump over 3 years, 2013, 14, 15, weeks in the end before he announced his candidacy for president. And of course, back then, he recorded some interviews that he's not exactly racing toward the microphone to remind people about. And so what I did was I found the archives on a physical hard drive in Miami, and I pulled the tapes. And Dan did not know this. He did not know this. And this is not like a performative theatrical way. He did not know what I was going to do.
In the wrestling business, this is what we call a shoot. This is all a shoot.
Oh, yeah. So, and he felt like he got shot by his employee, admittedly, like in the back, because I played the tapes for him. And we had this, a reckoning sounds too, I mean, it was in some sense like an accounting of what did we mess up here? And also it was great laughter, because in the end, what happens is you realize that Trump cannot stop himself from being a New York sports radio caller. He was Dan Le Batard's call-in guest over 3 years. And B, what he did inadvertently was say a lot of stuff that was incredibly prophetic in retrospect.
Yep. I heard it. I heard some. It like, you now knowing how it all played out, it almost has moments of feeling like a stump speech. Like he really goes into the Trumpisms. But at the time, there was no way Dan and Stu Gatz could have had any real understanding of what they were looking at. I mean, they could have been grossed out by him, because now in retrospect, it's easy to hear that
Of
a lot
course.
of it was quite gross. But at the time, you just be like, I mean, it's Donald Trump.
Well,
he's famous.
Peter, he was, I mean, Trump, for all of the criticisms that everybody can have for the obvious reasons, Trump is a skilled gas bag. We were talking about gas bags. Donald Trump is an A+. Like, we should not deny what everybody can hear, which is that he's the president that you want to, they used to say about presidents, right? Who do I want to get a beer with? Trump is different. Trump is the president you want to watch while drinking a beer, because he is going he's going to give you content. And so in retrospect, every time when Stugatz asks him in a very sports radio way, Donald, what's the best party you've ever been to? And he then he launches into, this is 2013, okay? He launches into an anecdote from a week before about being in Russia, surrounded by, he says, oligarchs at the Miss Universe pageant, which he owns. And he talks about how this was crazy. The wildest party of his life just happened a week ago. And then you go back and put together the timeline, dude. And that is the week of the alleged P-tape. And so this was just Stugatz accidentally stumbling into circumstantial evidence for this rumored mythical tape in political history that no one remembered until we dug this up and we were like, wait a minute, was Trump saying that the wildest week of Donald Trump's entire life, by the way? He's lived a wild life. A week before, in the exact setting that the P-tape was rumored to be taped in. And that's on the tapes.
So that's episode 1 of Pablo's show. Episode 2, a very different tone that just came out today as we're recording this, with Katie Nolan and Dan Soder, who Katie, of course, you may remember from her many years at ESPN and before that Fox Sports, and just being a generally funny, smart, great person. And Dan, who's an awesome comedian with ridiculous. Did he give you at least some solid impressions?
I think God, dude.
I hate to be that guy, but anytime I see him, he's obligated to do certain impressions.
I mean, you'll listen to the episode. There are just some lobs that I unapologetically throw. I'd like to think I'm Dwayne Wade lobbing it to LeBron, but it's really just me being like, hey, Dan, what would it sound like if Macho Man Randy Savage was giving a speech to your best friend Mike McDaniel's Miami Dolphins? And he goes into it. And by the way, that was part of the episode, was that, I mean, Dan Soder, I don't know if people know this, but his best friend in 7th and 8th grade was Mike McDaniel. And so he has just tales of that life.
I did not know that.
Oh, my God. It's incredible, this story. They grew up together in Colorado, tiny town. And so Dan Soder grew up with a version of Mike McDaniel that it just makes me laugh whenever I hear Soder do impressions of everybody in their childhood, because now, as he put it, like it's like living a nap dream. It's like, wait a minute, my best friend's the coach of what? And I'm engaged to who now? And we're at a Jets game together and this actually happened. So yeah, it's absurd.
That's crazy. And by the way, where are you full time now, Pablo?
So Meadowlark Media, when I say that Dan Le Batard is my boss, I mean that, man. He is my actual boss. So, and business partner, I suppose. So yeah, I'm part-time at ESPN, full-time at Meadowlark, and in which they're letting me do stories like inside of that Katie Nolan and Dan Soder episode. I did a very New York investigative journalism sort of segment, which was I found out why everybody is smelling weed at the U.S. Open. And I went and solved that mystery, Peter. So this is what Dan pays me.
Let me guess. Can I take a guess?
Yeah, please.
It's because everyone's smoking weed at the U.S. Open.
Well, 1,000,000% correct from the broadest strokes. But one thing I did want to appreciate about the U.S. Open, because I don't know if you like the U.S. Open, Peter. I think it's
love it. Go basically every year.
Yeah, right. It's like a music festival, and so in that way, it's sort of unsurprising.
It's like a douchey, rich music festival with no music, but like really entertaining sports and just constant amusement, Pablo, when you realize how many rich people there are in New York, and you're like, what do these people all do to be here?
That's exactly right. So this is the perfect setup to what I found out, because I go there and I'm like, all of these players at the U.S. Open are complaining about how court 17 specifically, this one court smells like Snoop Dogg's living room. That was a quote from Alexander Zverev. So he says this, and everyone's complaining about it. They're like, tennis players are OCD. They're complaining about how it smells like weed at court 17. And so I go to court 17 and I'm, sniffing around, and I talk to a man who did not want to share his name, but he is the guy in charge of Court 17, one of those uniformed employees. And I'm
Right.
like, look, what's going on at Court 17? And he's like, okay, so this is what's happening. No one is smoking weed inside of Court 17. We have security footage. It's not allowed. I've had my bosses on my ass all week because there are headlines about this. People are asking. It's like a viral story. So it's not happening inside the court. We've been on this ourselves really seriously for days now. But look over there. And I look over there. And of course, you know, this is Flushing. This is a US Open, a Grand Slam tournament inside of a park in Queens. And right next to Court 17 is where all the employees get off from work and they take breaks and they're park benches. And it's like all the people over there in that park are just blowing giant clouds. And it's a beautiful evening. And so the summer winds are just like blowing all of New York's scents and smells into Court 17, into the faces of all of those Connecticut aristocrats who are like, who dares sully a Grand Slam event? It's just like, it's a New York bleeping city, dude. And so thankfully, like, no one is getting arrested because of this. Everybody, and this is what I love, Peter, about the US Open. They're like, look, we get that you're complaining. No one can smoke it inside. But if some people are just getting off of work and they're just right there, we're not going to stop them. It's New York. This is the US Open. It's not Wimbledon. And I validated this firsthand. It was a delightful New York revelation.
So how much of your stories are going to involve like actually taking trips to go find things out? Like how much will Pablo go find out? And is Meadowlark ready to fit the to foot the bill for you going all over the world to figure these things out?
Yeah, is there a Brewster's Millions kind of vibe here where I'm going to spend all of Dan Le Batard's money before he realizes it? Kind of. I've been on the road reporting some stories that I'm excited about, revealing Friday, Peter, just as a teaser for me and you. I have an investigative piece that I went on a quest over months to solve that concerns your Washington Commanders. Okay. Yeah.
Do tell. Give me something.
I'll just tease you with the fact that it involves a $5 billion check and the mystery behind it as the team was up for sale. And it's a story that again, it's hard for me to reference everything, but it involves the Imperial Japanese Army. It involves Coach K. It involves Bob Marley. It involves my ancestral homeland. It involves the phrase, these nuts, with a Z. And all of that is showcased inside of, I promise, a journalistic quest to get to the bottom of how it was that your Washington Commanders was bid on by a man who, again, you'll have to listen to the episode, contains all of these multitudes. But it's
wow. Okay,
silly.
I'm fascinated by the story. I think I know what you're alluding to, and just as long as this doesn't result in somehow the sale being invalidated, I'm good.
This was my first concern. And I think it's okay to say that Josh Harris will continue to own your favorite team, but that there is a twist, even if I think you know the story that I'm referring to. There is a twist inside of the story that has not been reported yet. That, again, I'm just chilling, man, but it's real. There is a real twist that I did not anticipate that I think will change how you see that story.
Let's talk about that for a second. I personally am like, when people ask me about the upcoming season, I'm so happy and in disbelief that the sale got done that there's nothing except joy for me for this season. Like when everyone's like, oh, well, what do you think about Sam Howell? I go, well, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about everything now because this was impossible and it happened. So as one of the smart people who's actually a sports journalist in this business, were you pleasantly surprised that this actually happened? How did you take in and what did you make of the Commander sale?
Yeah, I was shocked, even though I knew that there were investigations at literally every possible level, right? State, federal, NFL, right? Sexual misconduct, financial misconduct. Dan Snyder is the decathlete. He's the Dan, dude, he's a Dan.
He's Dave and Dan.
I was going to say, he's Dave and Dan of scandal. Yes, well said. He does everything. And so I'm like, dude, the guy, but he can't be forced to give this up. And so to me, like, what is ego death? If I can get briefly psychedelic with you. Ego death is when the story you tell yourself about yourself is no longer something that you believe. And Dan Snyder, for 24 years, was the owner of this team. When he bought the team, he paid more than anybody else had paid for a pro sports franchise ever to do it. He was young. He was a local kid. This was his way into the most exclusive club. And so despite all of these scandals, all he had to do was just tell himself the story of why he mattered. And the fact that he, in the end, sold, either because there's some other bigger story that we don't even know about yet, or just because the shame finally got into his pores that way, I was shocked. And I didn't believe it until finally it happened, because all the starts and stops, the story that I'm referring to, the bids, was it Bezos? Who was it going to be? I always thought that Snyder had another angle, because he would never let the story he told himself about himself actually stop. And it stopped. And again, when Sam Howell takes that first snap, I guess I'll believe it then. But I kind of believe that Dan Snyder's going to like fan man into the stadium at the last second and be like, surprise.
Are you, I'll say this, you should at some point, there's a real interesting conversation and episode to be done about Jason Wright, who sort of has been quietly the steady hand from the last year or two of Snyder, and has now made it into the Josh Harris era.
The president of the team, the holdover.
Who they kept, and who is a very interesting and savvy guy who managed to get through. He is a smart enough dude to have been well aware of what was happening and managed to do enough to do his job and be cool with everyone, but also do his job in a way where he'd still be wanted to be around by the next group. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I think your instincts are I'm with you, man. I've been thinking about him. I think you articulated it well. Interesting, savvy are all these words that speak to cleverness, but also like an angle that he had been playing for a while, knowing like, because you rarely see this, right? It's like, how do you get hired as a top guy under one presidential administration, but then the opposition party takes over and they also want you? It's like, how does that work? What do you got? What do you got on everybody here?
Yeah, you have to be really good at what you do. So I wonder if we're allowed to talk about this. So you and I, we're on a non-ESPN platform, and we both are people who work at ESPN and other places. I've never asked this to a fellow ESPN colleague, but how do you feel about sort of the shots that often get taken at ESPN? Most recently, they've come in two interesting forms recently. Yeah. The scorned conservatives who have left ESPN. Charlie Arnold now is a big Fox News contributor. Sage Steele, we don't know where she will land exactly, but she certainly showed up with Megyn Kelly right away to tear down ESPN. As someone, as sort of a front-facing, open, honest about your sort of beliefs and morals kind of guy who has been at ESPN for a very long time, how do you feel about when these sort of moments happen?
Yeah, I think about it in terms of incentives, right? I'm like, okay, what is, and look, this is, let's use the cynical language that everybody who criticizes ESPN in the ways that you alluded to also uses it. Like, what are their incentives here? Where is the money here? What's the angle that's useful here? Why is it useful for you to say, only I tell the truth, right? It's because you want someone to then follow you to your truth-telling platform. Now, is that actually the truth? Right? Is that something that you like to trump up? And I'll use that pun semi-intentionally here, because it is a story that comforts the people who, again, want to hear a story about themselves that they like. So for me, I'm not here to tell you that ESPN is some bastion of nuance and political philosophy and they get everything right. My view on ESPN as somebody who has loved working there full-time and now part-time has always been that it's kind of like working for an airline, right? Like, everybody gets mad at it. It's omnipresent, but you still need to use it to get to where you want, which is to watch sports. Side note, I saw Tom Brady now literally being like one of those, like creative directors of Delta Airlines. And I was like, this is perfect. That happened yesterday. And I was thinking about
I literally just saw a headline and didn't even understand. So, okay, yes.
But just the idea that ESPN is one of those places that is there to be criticized, and we should not be surprised by any of it. It's part of the deal. Don't get mad when someone gets mad at you when you're on mute above a sports bar banquet, right? Like, that's it. But in terms of like, I was not allowed to say what I wanted to say, I'll just point this out. Stephen A. Smith is the most important person at ESPN. Stephen A. Smith has a podcast which I think is hilarious and actually like entertaining, because Stephen A. Smith in many ways is the greatest entertainer in our business. He had on, I believe it was Governor Chris Christie, and endorsed him for like president. He has been, Stephen A. Smith, on Hannity. Stephen A. Smith has been on Fox News in ways that would seemingly contradict the idea that I have been shackled by PC culture while working at ESPN. Just watch Stephen A. Smith's general sort of media presence. I'm pretty sure you can contain multitudes at this company, for better and for worse, by the way.
Right. And it's sort of like a very basic lesson that it seems like people are constantly struggling to deal with, which is like, there are different rules for different people. Yeah,
Dude,
there really are.
Dude,
that's kind of how every single thing works. And for better or for worse. But the idea that the two people I just referenced, that they were limited by what they could say, neither one of them had a platform on ESPN in which you would espouse views like that. Yeah. Hosting SportsCenter or First Take, no, that would be a weird place to get into conversations about a lot of political dialogue. But if you're Stephen A. Smith and you're essentially the face of the company and you do incredibly well and you do a podcast that's not on ESPN, you can espouse those views. So it just seems like this story gets told a lot. I was not allowed to, so now I can.
That's right.
When you look into what happened, and I think every case, and I'm not trying to pick on them too specifically, really in every case when people have left and say, now I'm free, I would dig a little further into if that's the real reason why those people are no longer there.
Yeah, I just think it's a little darkly amusing to me that people who deride the idea of all of these people, all of these demographics in America, trans people, black people, whomever, all of them claiming victimhood. This is the greatest country in the world. And yet their number one crusading message on the way out of ESPN is, I was victimized.
I know.
And I'm like,
it's crazy.
What? Okay. So anyway, I'm glad everyone has platforms now where they can say what they want to say. I look forward to hearing from them. If you want to use your platform in that way, cool. But I hope you got something to say now, because now you can say it. And now
exactly.
Now your bluff has been called. What you got?
Exactly. Well said. And by the way, just so you know, if you think like there are very outwardly progressive people like myself and Pablo, I still don't get on the air at ESPN every day and just start listing off all of my political thoughts. Like the
idea that someone, again, if you unmute around the horn, right, and you were to listen to what's happening, we're going to be talking about the Cowboys. All right.
Right. Exactly.
We're going to be talking about the Dallas bleeping Cowboys. That's kind of how sports television really goes if you actually watch sports television.
How angry, how many angry little snowflakes were there yesterday when Mina Kimes, when her new contract got revealed to the public? Oh, I loved every second of it.
Yeah. Again, like, may all of us be fractionally as valuable as Stephen A. Smith. This is also my goal in life. Let us all aspire to something that Mina has obviously quite clearly earned. My God.
No, Mina has very much, that's a perfect way of, she has earned being fractionally as important as Stephen A. Smith. I see the proof. The proof is in the pudding. And she does, by the way, like I think it was RC, Ryan Clark called her a unicorn. She is. She's an absolute sort of once in a lifetime sort of TV star, what she's done. And the idea that she wouldn't be wanted or desired to be there when she does a great job keeping eyeballs on the television for advertisers, which is the job, is wild to me. What are you, sports-wise, what are you most up on right now? Where are you? Do you have any particular focus right now? Are you super, obviously football's around the corner. Is there a fascinating storyline there? Are you already thinking about the NBA season? Where are you sports-wise?
Yeah, I'm everywhere, man. But the NFL, I'm going to be one of those guys who sits in front of his couch with a 3-year-old crying faintly in the background, wondering why I need to watch this man guide me through octoboxes. Like, I'm unironically, like, I just had my fantasy drafts this week. I'm absolutely monitoring the Commanders. I'm absolutely guy who, like, going to complain to you if you give him the opportunity to complain about Travis Kelce being the guy I drafted in the first round. And now, like, come on, dude, hyperextended. That's come on. I'm that guy. I am that guy. But on top of that, yeah, I have some NFL stories. This Commander story on Friday. I have a Russell Wilson thing that I'm working on. Yeah, I Peter, you know this, I think, too. As much as you grow up with allegiances, and I'm ostensibly a Giants fan, and I enjoyed that before I got into sports media, now I root for self-interest. I root for the stories that I work on and the takes that I had to be right, so that someone in my mentions doesn't get mad at me for being the guy, the Chinese Mexican guy at the sports bar who doesn't know what he's talking about. That's basically my goal leading to September 8th.
I appreciate that very much. Are you keeping an eye on the brewing filth and what this promises to turn into a bigger thing? I think the Logan Paul story.
My algorithm, I'm again, it's the thing of like, my algorithm is serving me all this porn. It's like, well, you probably should stop clicking on the porn.
Exactly.
I'm getting all of this stuff from Dylan Dennis and Logan Paul and this lawsuit. And I find it's fascinating to me, this story, right? Because it feels like I should not be clicking on any of it, just as a person who wants to be, I don't know. Again, I called my podcast a magazine. You get my vibe. Like, this is beneath me on some level, but also I'm clicking and I'm like, who am I rooting for here? Right? Because I see Nina Agdal, I guess the fiance of Logan Paul, basically being cyberbullied with revenge porn, allegedly.
Yes.
Right?
It's all those keywords are there. It's revenge porn, it's cyberbullying, and it's definitely all in there. It's brutal.
And so I am watching this MMA guy, Dylan Dennis, who's fighting, Logan Paul is fighting, boxing, just dump all of this stuff onto the internet. And I'm like, feeling bad intuitively, of course, for just Nina Agdal. Like, I'm like, this seems like truly what you would write in a movie script about why women shouldn't be on the internet anymore, because this stuff happens. But at the same time, I'm like, but wait a minute, hold on. Now I'm feeling bad for the Logan Paul camp, because Logan Paul, until this thread I clicked on, was the guy I thought would do stuff like this, allegedly. Like, the Paul brothers are the definition of gaming the attention economy. I will do anything for eyeballs, shame and dignity in this sort of, again, way that erodes at the fabric of everything we hold dear as a society. When shame is no longer a guardrail, all things are possible. And I thought that was Logan Paul's deal. So the idea that the rabbit got the gun, in a sense, I'm like, so wait a minute, is this just a let them fight situation? Like that, you know, the Ken Watanabe and Godzilla, just like, let them fight. Like, is that what I'm feeling? I don't know, honestly, who I'm rooting for, if I should root for anybody at this point.
Yeah, I mean, except for Nina Agdal to be able to get extricated from this craziness.
Yes,
so it's an interesting point you brought up, though, that I hadn't thought about, Pablo, which is, so yes, the Logan Paul, that is how he got famous, right? Like, him and Jake, that is what they do, and they do it exceptionally well. Both have now taken some steps, I think particularly Logan, towards mainstream entertainment, right? Logan Paul is now a WWE sort of fixture at this point. He shows up all the time. By the way, he's extremely good. Like, if you're looking for another story. I was
going to ask you about his scouting report. You think he's actually legit at that?
Oh, no, he's not even, there's not even thinking involved. I mean, he is extremely good. I was at SummerSlam. I was watching his match in the TV locker room that I am in with Booker T, who's my colleague at WWE.
Yeah.
And I'm just listening to him observe. And it was just really nice to hear that someone who knows this better than anyone, it's not just my naive eyes. Like, this kid is the real deal. He's an incredible talent when it comes to wrestling. He physically, when you're near him, you're like, oh my God, this guy is not a YouTuber. This guy is a pro athlete. That is very clear.
Right.
The fascinating thing is, though, it's almost as if he's now sort of graduated from that level of internet craziness, but he enlisted, knowing it would sell the fight. He enlisted a guy who he knew was capable of being this way. But now what do you do when that guy you've enlisted has gone entirely too far?
There is there's like what is it, like a Darth Vader Anakin vibes, you know? I'm like, wait a minute. Oh no, the student has become the master. Right. And now he's striking you down.
Listen, by the way, I have had, on a much smaller scale, situations before that I can relate to, where I get into it with someone whose only standard is the internet, and they don't have any sort of corporate jobs.
Right.
And then the conversation goes to a place where you go, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just going to respectfully bow out of the conversation now, because I don't have anything to offer here. And I think Logan Paul, between the WWE, Prime, the relationships he now has with all the soccer teams that are officially Prime teams, this is a guy who could be on the path to being a billionaire. I don't think he can really get involved that deeply.
This is
something there.
It's such a fascinating evolution, though, because you're right that the Logan Paul, Jake Paul economy, right, is sort of like the first big success story, I think predating like Mr. Beast even, right, in terms of just like these guys who started from nothing as influencers who got mainstream attention. And now they're entering the world that they campaigned against, the world of respectability, the world of PC culture in some way. And so the idea that they handpicked a guy to play the game that they can't play so much anymore reminds me of my feelings about like walking around on the sidewalk in New York sometimes. It's like if someone wants to yell at me, I gotta keep it moving, dude. Like, I'm sorry. Like, there's so much less for a normal person to forget about TV stuff. There's so much less for a dad to gain by getting into this in-person interaction on a sidewalk with an unhinged person than the unhinged person who might now be recording on a cell phone also.
Oh my God.
Have to gain. So like, pulling the parachute cord on this interaction.
By the way, I literally see that with every interaction. That's how especially in New York, you're just like, anytime you go out, something could happen that could change your life. And I am not allowing that to happen when I go to the bodega to get a sandwich. Like, it can't happen. If you want to hear fascinating prose like this, as well as incredible in-depth stories and great guests, you can hear it on Pablo's new show, Pablo Torre Finds Out, www.pablo.show. Pablo, congrats. If you ever need anything, holler at your boy.
Peter, you just agreed to come on my show. So thank you. This is a binding verbal contract.
That's fine. Just pick a good I'll make it a good either wrestling or
a
Commanders themed episode, and I'm there for you.
You true to the name, you will find out what I've already decided you're going to do for me. So thank you.
All right. I look forward to it. Thanks, dude.
Thank you.